Well, howdy again everyone, my name's Chris and today I'm going to be taking a look at a fascinating little lens which has some interesting quirks and unique features, so let's get stuck into a review of the Canon EF-M 28mm f3.5 IS STM Macro. As the name suggests, it's an image-stabilized, wide-angle macro lens, and it's only for Canon's mirrorless EOS M camera system. It won't work at all on digital SLR cameras. It costs $300 or a little under £300, which is about an average price for a modern macro lens, although there are cheaper solutions out there. Macro photography is incredibly fun. A whole world of tiny details are at your fingertips if you can find an interesting enough subject to take pictures of. The disadvantage of most macro lenses is that they're hard to use handheld. Even a modern, image-stabilized macro lens will get wobbly when you're shooting close up, and you normally need to stop down the aperture to at least f5.6 or f8 to get enough depth of field to have your subject at least partially in focus. So in order to get sharp macro pictures, you'll normally need to crack open your tripod to keep your camera still for those long exposures, and using a tripod for macro photography can be a bit fiddly. It's all a question of light and getting enough of it onto your subject. Well, Canon have cleverly solved this issue by fixing a circular light around the lens's front element itself, as you can see here. And at close distances, it's nice and effective. Here's some close-up video footage without the light on, and now with the light. As you can see, there's a world of difference, which is very helpful for video work, close-up, or still photography. Pressing the button again or holding it down gives you extra modes and brightnesses. The light gets its power from your camera's battery, so it'll be a tiny extra drain on that. And of course, it's not bright enough to illuminate subjects at normal distances. It's also worth noting that relying on such a pointed light source may not be the best idea if you're taking pictures of a metallic or otherwise reflective subject. On certain subjects, you'll still get much better results without the light and using a tripod. But on the whole, the built-in light is very helpful indeed and a neat feature. Finally, we have here a really hand-holdable macro lens. What also helps with handheld photography is this lens's image stabilization. At normal distances, it's very effective indeed, as you can see here, holding your image very still and working silently, useful for video work. At closer distances, like with all image stabilization systems, it's far less effective, only helping you out a little. Here's some close-up footage without stabilization, and here it is turned on. Only a slight difference, but it is at least helping a bit. Also helpful for handheld photography is this lens's focal length of 28mm, which is an unusually wide angle for a macro lens. That's the full frame equivalent of about 45mm, making this a perfect standard lens, neither wide angle nor telephoto, a lens which you could take with you most places for your everyday photography. And wider angle lenses also make it easier to get sharper pictures handheld. The only issue with this lens's focal length really is that you'll need to get right up against your subject for macro work, so this won't be a great macro lens for shooting insects or anything else that might want to run away from you. Bear that in mind. So on the whole, this lens is quite technically accomplished with interesting parameters. What's least interesting about the lens is its decidedly average maximum aperture of only f3.5. It doesn't really let in a lot of light or give you very out of focus backgrounds for your normal photography. Still, f3.5 is quite usable in most situations, and it's a wider aperture than your average zoomable kit lens, which will only manage f4.5 or so at the same focal length. Well, that's enough now about the lens's features. Let's see about its build quality. It's based on a plastic lens mount, a bit disappointing for a lens that costs around £300. However, it is fantastically small and light. It's a collapsible lens, which means you have to turn a control ring to get it into shooting mode before you do anything else, where the front element extends a little. And actually, the lens has one more trick up its sleeves. With that big control ring, you can set it to either normal mode or super macro mode. In normal mode, the lens acts as a normal 1x magnification macro lens, being able to project life-size images onto your camera's sensor, while also being able to focus to infinity for normal photography. But switch the lens to super macro mode to get just a little bit closer to your subject, down to 1.2x magnification. As you can see in these pictures, there's only a small difference in closeness, but it does admittedly squeeze more detail out of your subject. The eagle-eyed among you will note that, in super macro mode, my shutter speeds had to be about twice as long, so you are getting a darker image in that mode, making it a little harder to shoot. Also, if you want to focus to infinity again for some normal photography, you'll have to switch back to normal mode. So the lens's super macro mode, while not being spectacular, does have some limited value. The only other control point on the lens is the manual focus ring at the front. It turns very smoothly and it's electronically coupled to the lens's focus motor. When you're shooting in manual focus mode, it's nice and responsive and precise. The lens has one of Canon's STM autofocus motors, which is completely silent. In good light, it works quickly, but in low light, it works a little slowly, and it has a bit of a tendency to focus hunt in whatever light you're working in. What's also noteworthy is that this has to come with a special lens cap with a special ridge inside it to hold on to that tiny front element. Don't lose that unique lens cap, although it does look like Canon sell replacements for about $10. If you want to use filters with this lens, then you'll have to use the supplied lens hood, which also acts as a holder for 43mm filters. However, it will blot out the lens's special light and look slightly unwieldy too. Well, that's about it. My goodness me, what a lot of interesting features. Well, lots of interesting features are one thing, and image quality is another. So let's see how it performs on a 24 megapixel camera, my little Canon EOS M3. Firstly, at normal distances and wide open at f3.5, the lens is nice and sharp in the middle of the image with average contrast. The corners of the image at f3.5 are not bad. There's a little softness, but it's quite decent really. Stop the lens down to f5.6 for a big increase in resolution and contrast, leaving you with sharp corners, and at f8 they're even a tiny bit sharper. At f11 it's about the same, but at f16 the effects of diffraction are finally kicking in, softening the image, and at f22 the whole image is soft. But overall, at normal distances, the EF-M 28mm Macro gives a very good performance for everyday photography. Let's see about macro distances now. This is the image quality in super macro mode, and we're looking closely here at a Victorian shilling from the year 1900. At f3.5, the depth of field is absolutely tiny, as you can see. The areas in focus are very sharp. At f5.6, they're perfectly sharp, and also pretty much perfect at f8. If you stop down to f11, then softness is creeping in due to the effects of diffraction. f16 is soft, and f22 is very soft. Well, the effects of diffraction are as unavoidable as breaking the laws of physics that God has instituted, and so we can say that the lens provides a decently sharp macro performance from f3.5 to f8. Let's see now about vignetting and distortion. The lens projects a very tiny amount of pincushion distortion, barely noticeable, so that's good. At f3.5, vignetting is heavy, giving us very dark corners, so you will definitely want to use peripheral illumination on your camera or stop down to f5.6 to get rid of it. How does this lens perform against bright lights? Macro lenses normally struggle here, but this one does reasonably well. We don't see too much flaring at all, probably because of the smaller glass elements that this wider angle lens is made up of. Finally, let's see about the quality of this lens's bokeh. At normal distances, it's not very easy to get an out of focus background, but when you do, those backgrounds look fairly soft. This picture is about as out of focus as you can get with a portrait shot, and the bokeh looks fairly nice. When you're shooting up close, the backgrounds naturally disappear in a blurriness which also looks quite nice. Well, overall, the Canon EF-M 28mm Macro is a macro lens that's a very good performer optically and mechanically, and it's hugely enjoyable to do handheld macro photography with good results for a change. It's a clever piece of kit that neatly complies with Canon's philosophy of building very compact mirrorless lenses. Professional macro photographers might put their nose up a little bit at it, because its wide angle of 28mm means you have to get really close to your subject, causing problems for taking pictures of tiny animals or insects that might run away. But everyone else will have a blast. This is a smart and enjoyable lens to use, which can yield very good results, and so it comes recommended.